Let's watch a CNN panel full of economists and, Scott Jennings as they discuss Trump's tariff plan that is back on the forefront as he announced on Truth Social last night that he will be charging Mexico and Canada a 25% tariff on all goods coming into this country, further showing his misunderstanding of tariffs as it's, again, placing the tariff on American companies importing from these countries with an additional 10% tariff on any goods imported from China as well. China, who supplies 90% of American antibiotics, 80% of ingredients in the totality of our medicine, medical devices. I mean, don't even get me started on tech. With Mexico, it's agriculture. Canada, we have a lot of imports that we get from them as well. And last time we started a trade war, our farmers needed bailed out because they export to China and China retaliated. But let's watch this panel and see what the totality of the effects of this we can discuss are.
It may be unexpected to Americans who thought Trump was going to lower their prices. Because if you voted for Trump because you thought he was going to bring grocery prices down, I have some very bad news for you. A lot of our produce comes from Mexico. 2/3 of the tomatoes that Americans purchase are from Mexico. 90% of the avocados that they purchase are from Mexico, just to mention two examples. So that guac is definitely going to cost extra. If you voted for Trump because you thought he was going to bring down the cost of housing, a lot of our lumber, cement, other materials comes from Canada, which means that construction costs are going to go up. Not to mention all of the ways he's going to roil the U.S. auto industry, because a lot of autos cross borders in North America multiple times before they're ultimately finished and sold to consumers. Not to mention the fact that a lot of U.S. manufacturers purchase inputs, intermediate goods like metals and cement and other things from Canada, from Mexico.
These tariffs have massive downstream effects that most people don't even think of that can also be multiplicative in nature, meaning they are applied multiple times and they indeed will shock people who thought Trump was truly the only solution to lower grocery or housing prices, because these are massive tariffs on Mexico, for instance, of whom we rely on for tons of produce and agriculture that just wouldn't be cost efficient to produce here, from cost of labor to cost of production, etc., versus the price and the expected profit margin of these industries. It wouldn't even work out to do this kind of micro level manufacturing here, micro level agriculture here. And this expands out to multiple industries, right? Like clothing, of whom we get 99% of our shoes abroad, 70% come from China, same with shirts, etc. We already have lower level tariffs on them, but raising the prices of those are just going to make clothing even more expensive. Medicine from China, again, another massive import. Sweeteners and sodas, pretty much any item you find in Target, right? Like any store like that. And just like in 2019, when we hit a manufacturing recession because of tariffs effects on metal and steel, this will also have those same effects affecting multiple manufacturing industries as well, affecting our jobs, affecting wages in those industries, affecting GDP, with a lot of this just not being profitable enough to move to the US, where we manufacture on more of a macro level, right? Just kind of like idea that we have to micro manufacture or produce everything in America just isn't sufficient. And in the long run, it typically hurts jobs, wages, and GDP growth to attempt it. And also this kind of massive disrupting of supply chains is one of the largest factors of what can cause inflation. So look for that in the near future as well.
Not to mention even the retaliation that we should expect. All of which is going to be very bad for consumers, not to mention, again, many of the U.S. workers that Trump allegedly wants to help.
What about tequila?
Tequila, I would bet that that's going to suffer too.
I'm out. Count me out.
Can I ask our Republicans at the table, I know there's a love-hate relationship with tariffs, with some people sort of saying, like, yes, they can be a cudgel against other countries when you want to have influence over their policy. And we should say in these Truth Social tweets, he was talking about immigration and the border and fentanyl. But that's a long economic laundry list.
You know, the last time Catherine and I were on, you were saying that if Trump deports illegal immigrants, our groceries are going to go up because who will pick our crops? Now you're saying if he does tariffs, you're saying, well, the groceries come from Mexico and Canada.
Yeah,
so
we do produce quite a bit of
you have now officially have it both ways.
All of the groceries, these things are not mutually exclusive.
And this is also very true. It's a part that not many people want to discuss when they talk about tariffs, is the effects on the other side of them as well, right? The retaliatory effects of other countries and how they're going to place tariffs back on you as well, which if it ends up hindering our exports that will hurt businesses. Businesses who rely on these exports, for instance, then might have to lay off workers. They might have to cut wages, which costs us jobs, wages, GDP growth. Again, you can see how these things multiply and go downstream, right? Well, also, it could possibly send us into a recession, just like it did in 2019, a manufacturing recession, or cause like what Trump also had to do last time, where our farmers needed bailed out because of the retaliation to his tariffs hurting their exports. And the point that Scott Jennings is trying to make here is disingenuous, because they're not at all mutually exclusive, right? We import a large part of our produce. We do produce some ourselves, but the part we do produce ourselves, we do so mostly relying on cheap, undocumented labor anyway, but the split is probably like 80% imports. It's like there's two ways to look at this. One, if you're talking about the totality of like produce, right? All these like corn, tomatoes, this, it's probably like we import like 90% of it, and then we'll make like 10% of it, if that, maybe even less. These are just like off top numbers. Don't hold me to the, to the data king for these percentages. I'm just like making an example. The other way to look at this is in a specific industry like corn, right? And again, this is like corn might not be a good one, but like avocados. I know we import a lot of avocados. With avocados, it's like of 100% of the avocados in America, we might make 1% using this undocumented labor, but we still import 99% of it. So having the tariffs raise the prices of those imports is still going to hurt the prices, despite the fact that maybe we use undocumented labor for 1% of them. But also, if you're putting these tariffs to stem immigration and now importing these products is also costing companies more because of the tariffs, prices are still going to go up because the labor will be more expensive, the price of the product will be more expensive, so they will pass that cost down onto you. And through historical precedents anyway, we see that this is kind of a moot argument because we see firms just pass the cost on to consumers rather than doing all this, going through the process of trying to build out their own infrastructure so they can produce it themselves. They just continue to import and pass that cost on to consumers.
What are
It's not
you
even
walking
unintended
into?
consequences. If you look at whom Trump prioritized for deportation in his first term, it was not the criminals. In fact, he released more convicted and charged criminals into the United States than Biden did, because he was filling up his jails with asylum seekers and TPS recipients whose TPS had expired, and refugees and visa overstays. They can say all they want that they're planning to prioritize criminals, which I think is great. In fact, Obama did that. Obama, remember, was the deporter in chief. But that is not what Trump did. He literally rescinded a Trump-era order that prioritized detaining and deporting criminals in favor of having no priorities, which means everyone, which means your business partner, which means an asylum seeker.
This is actually a very good point, and one I have not raised myself because I don't like giving any credence to the idea of deportations. I think it's pretty racist and not something that should ever be bared out in reality. But if we're speaking in a realm where this has to happen, starting with criminals is obviously the way you want to do it, which isn't even what Trump's focus was on. It's not on. It's just what he panders about, then when he gets in, he shows that it's more about racism for him, where he actually rescinded the Obama era. In the clip, she said Trump era, she meant Obama era. She's talking fast, whatever. But the Obama era law, where deportations had to, by law, prioritize criminals, to where he then rescinded that so he could go after anyone, no priorities, just deport whoever, right? And then what did he do when he got in and started doing that? He deported asylum seekers. He deported those with expired TPS or TPS, that status that or temporary protected status he could fight in the courts, visa overstays, these types of people. He's now talking about going after DREAMers and DACA and using the Alien Enemies Act or Alien Sedition Act or whatever it is to go after possibly even legal immigrants or even citizens born in foreign countries. I mean, the objective fact of the matter is that Trump released more criminal immigrants into the country than Biden. He also released them at a higher percent than Biden. These are objectively facts. So this idea that he's the guy who secured our border and will do it again is almost entirely built up on fantasy through looking at the past through rose-tinted glasses, and one that, when matched with these ridiculous tariffs, will only stand to hurt us massively economically as a country.